Today I'm going to explain the principle of how we use submaximal exercise test to predict VO2max, so our maximal oxygen intake. The gold standard for measuring VO2max or VO2 peak is through indirect calorimetry, often called a metabolic cart. And this is a machine where we can directly measure oxygen consumption at the mouth. We can also measure things like ventilation, tidal volume, breathing frequency, etc., and volume of carbon dioxide produced. However, most people do not have access to these metabolic carts, so we need to have some sort of submaximal predictive test. There's a lot of different ones. They're based on all sorts of different types of exercise. So for example, there's ones for walking, there's step tests, there's cycloergometer tests, or running on a treadmill. The basic principle is the same. So we know that someone's heart rate response to different exercise intensities indicates fitness. So under normal conditions, so the person's not sick, they're not taking any medication to lower their normal heart rates. So if someone is under normal conditions, there's a close linear relationship between someone's volume of oxygen consumed and their heart rate during submaximal exercise. So I'm going to show you a graph here to illustrate this. So you can see here on the x-axis we have different exercise intensities that elicit different VO2s, so volume of oxygen consumed. And on the y-axis I've plotted someone's theoretical heart rate response. And again, we have a linear relationship here. So as exercise intensity, or VO2, increases, so does their heart rate, so that they can deliver more oxygen to the working muscle. The second principle we're going to talk about here is that the slope of this line will change with endurance training. That is, at any given exercise intensity, a fit person is able to transport and consume the same amount of oxygen at a lower heart rate than a person with a lower VO2 max. So this is illustrated here. So if we take someone who's working at, let's say, a VO2 of 1.5 liters per minute, to deliver that amount of oxygen and use that amount of oxygen, a trained person requires a lower heart rate because their stroke volume is higher, so the amount of blood pumped per beat in their heart is higher, and their ability to extract oxygen from that blood is also higher. So their heart doesn't have to beat as quickly to deliver and use the same amount of oxygen compared to an untrained person, shown here in green, who has a higher heart rate at any given exercise intensity. You can see this at rest as well. So if you take an endurance trained person's heart rate at rest, it's going to be 50 beats per minute, as an example. Whereas an untrained person, someone who doesn't regularly engage in endurance exercise, their resting heart rate will be about 70 beats per minute. They're doing the same thing, they have the same oxygen demand, about 3.5 mils per kilogram per minute. However, to supply that, their heart doesn't have to beat as quickly. So finally, the third thing we're going to talk about here is that on the basis of this VO2 heart rate relationship, we can predict an individual's VO2 max by the heart rate response to two submaximal exercise intensities. So for example, a good one of this is the Astra and bike test. So let's just say we have a 20-year-old. So if we use the imperfect formula of 220 minus their age, we can have a theoretical maximal heart rate of 200 beats per minute. And if we draw a line across and continue the slope up, so if we plotted 2 points and drawn a theoretical line between the two and continue that slope up to the theoretical maximal heart rate, and then draw a line down, we could say that this is someone's theoretical VO2 max, so it would be about 2.5 liters per minute here. Consequently, a trained person who has a lower heart rate at any given exercise intensity, if we were to continue the slope of the line up to meet their theoretical maximal heart rate, and then down to their theoretical VO2 max, we'd be looking at here, around 3.2 liters per minute. There's all sorts of charts and tables to do this in all the different tests, but this is the basic principle that all these tests are using.